Live your life, boy.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Conspiracy Farm, where we don't start the conspiracies, we just add the water. And now, your host of the most state-of-the-art, most informed podcast on the interweb, I present to you Pat Miletich and Jeffrey Wilson. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for war?
Yeah, rear naked choke of Cocker Spaniel, bro. You know what I'm saying?
Bro.
Change the neighborhood up.
Conspiracy Farm. Go. Check it out.
All right, hello and welcome to another installment. Jeffrey Wilson is certainly here with me today, as always, and we're excited to bring a special guest to you. This is a special treat. This really is for me. Rarely do we have somebody on the show with his level of knowledge and experience in a myriad of different areas. This is a gentleman who is an expert in soil remediation, reclamation, an agriculture expert, and also homeopathic doctor. Guy who has treated upwards of 19 to 20,000 patients, millions of acres of land he's treated. He's got numerous products on the market to help agriculture folks, garden folks, lawn and garden, whatever it is you need to fix with your soil, your animals, and yourself, this man can do it. Dr. Wil Spencer, we want to welcome you to the show.
Hey, all right. Thanks for asking me to be on. Yeah,
and so, I've gotten to know you a little bit through phone calls and listening to your level of expertise and knowledge, and something that, I've in an uneducated way, just an observational way over all the years of being an athlete and a coach, observing what seems to make the human body tick way better than other human bodies and do things that humans are not able to do, and then eventually kind of getting through the food nightmare that we're all dealing with in this country that's unique in the world, and then the soil, of course, that's been severely damaged across from coast to coast here. So we for me, I'd like to start at the soil, and I'd like to ask you some questions in terms of, the products, the agriculture products that are being put into the soil and the situation that we've created for ourselves here.
that sounds good.
So specifically, more than anything else, we're seeing petroleum-based fertilizers and, synthetic herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, just numerous products being dumped on our soil constantly and on our crops. And, the microorganisms in our soil, the billions and trillions of I don't think even experts understand fully what we're dealing with here. But, what has been done, what percentage of our soil is, severely damaged at this point? How long is it going to take to fix? There's a lot of questions there. So, kind of fill us in a little bit on the situation that we're dealing with right now.
Sure. There was a study done, a long-term study. I think it was like 1964, Ames, Iowa Research Station. They did an essay of and weighed the amount of bacteria or microbes in the soil in 1 acre of soil. It was something like 2,200 pounds. And that was in the early 60s, 64, and then it was 2000 something, 4, 5, 6, something like that. They did the same thing again, and there was less than 100 pounds. And a lot of those were genetically modified. So just that alone right there, if you just sit with that for just a few seconds to a minute and really think about just that alone, that is the state we're in. It's really sad.
And the state of Iowa, which I'm from, is in your mind probably, you think, one of the worst in the nation?
No.
No? Where are we dealing with? Where else are we dealing with some severely damaged soil? Of course, the Texas, the Arizonas,
everywhere
like that,
there's conventional agriculture.
Right.
Like I come from northern Minnesota. My dad went from a small farm, 380 acres or so. That was having diversity. He had pigs, did some sheep, and he had crops, but he rotated and green manured and all that. And then he went from that little farm to over 3,000 acres in the 70s. And they're still farming the same way, but potatoes, corn, and beans rotation as from the 70s. So we have 50 years of the same farming. Basically, they're farming hydroponically because it's just blow sand in the Anoka sand plain, and if they don't put their nutrition on, the fertilizer either on topically or in through the irrigation systems, they don't have a crop. And that's pretty customary. That's Illinois, Idaho, anywhere there's this big chemical farming going on, is the soil is toxic. The soil is, creating food that is only as healthy as the soil, which is in not good enough, causing diseases. And then the people consume it, the animals consume it, and now we have this food chain of sickness and disease.
I mean, without throwing them under the bus, but I guess I don't know how comfortable we feel with it. What companies are we talking about? Your Cargills, your Archer Daniels Midlands of the world? Who are we talking about that's largely responsible for a lot of this?
All of your university consultants in all of the ag, all of them, they're training the ag consultants. The ag consultants then are, promoting the use of Helena and Ciba-Geigen and Bayer Crop Science and, then the ADM and the name Cargill and so forth. It's the whole. What's the word for that? There's the
whole system.
The whole USDA model is in and of itself a cancer.
Did you say Bayer? Is that Bayer, the German company?
Yeah, Bayer Crop Science.
Okay, I didn't know if it was the same as the Bayer. Anyway,
So
it's the same Bayer. See,
Okay.
that's what people don't get. This is what ties human health into soil health, because the big guys, they're all in they're all in the menage a trois together.
Right, and we're going to get back to Bayer and some of these other companies that were very successful in the Weimar Republic in Germany in the 30s, and when disease and everything else was exploding amongst the citizens. But I want to go back to, just my childhood. I'm in my 50s and spending summers down on family farms down in southern Iowa, and noticing grandparents and a lot of relatives and a lot of other old farmers suddenly coming up, with Parkinson's, which now they've divulged finally that the corporation that was creating the product, that the agriculture product that ultimately caused Parkinson's, they had suppressed the science on all of that. And we're looking at so many I think it basically, and you can get into this, we don't want to go straight into human DNA and health and all of that, but all of these different synthetic chemicals and heavy metals that are existing in humans' bodies, whether they're drinking the water, whether they're eating the food, however they're getting it into their bodies, it's going to manifest in different ways, different types of diseases, and many of those was Parkinson's or cancer or hormonal destruction. Are we correct in assuming that that's what's happening?
100%.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing is, even as a little kid, I looked at these people, and they were working with the chemicals and all of this, and there was something that just intuitively told me, okay, all of these people are being poisoned because something causes these health issues, and it's just something that I was curious about, even in childhood. It was crazy to go back to. And speaking of childhood and sickness, you grew up on the family farm. I'm assuming there were chemicals used, and you had a childhood plagued with some health issues, correct?
Oh, majorly. Usually the summer flu for me started right when they started spraying the potatoes with pesticides, and the Roundup was later on, but it was the pesticides for killing the bugs, potato bugs. And then it was 7 to 10 days. They sprayed that on through the whole growing cycle, and I basically had a pattern mimicking the spray pattern of the plains of flu. They called it the flu. I just remember being a young kid and being sick, and like, why am I getting the flu in the summertime? This makes no sense to me. But if you look at what flu really is the body getting rid of toxins, then you understand when my body was actually doing its thing. But I was not healthy as a kid. Not at all. And my dad had an airplane and a helicopter and sprayed chemicals immense. I mean, he bought into the whole. I was the kid in the passenger seat of the truck when my dad was talking to the university guys that came out and the ag consultants pushing all this. And I mean, ultimately my dad ended up killing himself just from depression. He was overweight. He had all his own health problems. It was, he basically lost the farm in the 80s to the corporation because he had to sell because in the 80s, if you didn't go bigger, you didn't make it if you didn't buy in totally, and he sold. And my health, I didn't get healthy until and realize there was a better health until I was 20. Until my Indian friend gave me Indian meaning of a Native American, gave me a glass of this stinky ass horrible tea, and said, "Here, drink this. Your asthma will just go away." And it did. 20 minutes, it was gone. I took my first real breath of my life at that point, after a glass of wild-crafted herbal tea, and I haven't looked back ever since that point in time to the natural. I gave up all my pharmaceutical drugs. I just quit everything cold turkey at that point and just said, I'm done with that crap.
You know, it's crazy. It's crazy the parallels between the pharmaceutical world, because they're technically the exact same thing, the agriculture world and the pharmaceutical world, you know, with what they're doing. Just as, you know, you healed yourself and learned about these things and have, again, in your own words, have not looked back. And once that light bulb comes on, it never goes off again. And the same situation for me in my early 20s. But, you know, it's the same thing as many parents who are the most adamant, you know, not proponents, but opponents of the vaccine world, you know, are people who are parents of vaccine injured children, right? It's kind of the same thing, but even worse for those folks that have had their own children injured by these products.
Oh man, the vaccine, I can have hundreds and hundreds of stories of, it's very clear you're holding a healthy child and you go get your vaccine and you come home in 3 to 5 or 7 days and now you have a significant change. And it's a horror story of what we're living with, the denial, strategic, implemented, weaponized denial of the system against just the vaccine damage.
Well, not only just the weaponization of it, but like the complete lack of accountability. You can't sue these pharmaceutical companies for damaging yourself or your child.
Right. Yeah, they strategically set it up that way. They stacked all the cards in their favor.
So if we can't go after these folks, we can at least educate others to protect themselves. Number one, starting at the soil. I feel that the war, you know, has been raging, as you mentioned, you know, at least since the 70s on our soil, the Green Revolution, all of that stuff that happened to our universities. The same thing going back to, you know, Rockefeller hijacking the medical world and the medical schools, Harvard and what have you, with synthetics. The same thing happened, you know, a little bit later on, obviously, to the agriculture world and the university education departments for all of these different sciences, so to speak. You know, when you go and test someone's soil, someone asks you for help, whether it's a farmer, whether it's, you know, a large organization, a state, county, whatever it is, when they ask you to come in and look, you know, tell us about that process. Say I'm a guy that owns 10,000 acres and I want you to fix my soil. What's going to take place in that process?
First, we're going to we use some pretty advanced technology. It was actually created in 1924. And it's so cutting edge as in laboratory analysis of things. So for the soil sample and a picture of the soil, we can pretty much monitor everything down to the parts per trillion. We can monitor the life force and all of that. So that's our starting point. And then basically we have computer software that gives us a protocol to follow. We work within the biodynamic spray calendar, which is the moon phase calendar. We work within that because if you work with nature, then nature will work with you. And you can find the biodynamic calendars. They're online. There's several of them that we work with inside that regiment of that calendar, because you want to work with nature, because working the corporate farms, the USDA model is to, just like medicine again, it's to conquer and control nature. And you can see what basically you're warring on nature constantly, and nature is warring back at you constantly. And so when you work with nature and the energetics and the model of life as an organism, then the software is built to, within that dynamic. So then we're just feeding that soil what it needs, because the soil has its own immune system. The soil has its own, just like looking at a gut, it's literally so similar. I mean, in England, when you go to the bathroom and have a bowel movement, they call it making soil. It's that streamlined. And so they don't say that much anymore, but that's the way they used to talk.
Well, don't they say you
Rockefeller?
You soiled yourself. That was a common term when you shot yourself, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, there's these sayings have a reason. I mean, this is just farm boy knowledge, if you will, but it's real. And they've been sanitizing these kinds of things out of our societies because they want to control and war against things. They meaning whoever they is,
right? Of course,
not the common man, right?
Right. And so go ahead.
Well, it all seems so obvious, like the threat to humanity, if you will. They don't want you self-sufficient. They don't want you eating the best foods and crops. They feed us garbage to then enter us into the pharmaceutical world. It just, what is the third leading cause of death in the United States is under, kind of allopathic or doctor's care. I mean, it seems very apparent. The threat seems very apparent.
It does for those that can see through the Stockholm syndrome.
Exactly.
Because those glasses are pretty thick, and they really taint the mind of especially the kids nowadays going through school from K to bachelor's and master's and PhDs. I mean, that whole system right now for the last 30 years has been constructed to make happen what was happening today.
Well, and then you throw in COVID, how dare you question me? I have a white freaking coat and a stethoscope, man. Like, we're never wrong type thing. It just makes us double down on these supposed authority figures.
Yeah, that's one of the planks in the manifesto, isn't it?
Right. So the modern agriculture, I read this going through your Environautics.com website, with all your products for agriculture and for animal health as well. Reading a quote, I can't remember who it was that said it, something about modern agriculture as a strategy of managing symptoms. If that doesn't sound familiar to the modern medical community, that it's literally, like I said, one and the same. They are mirror images of each other in every way, shape, or form. And like you just said, our gut biome, with the destruction of the soil of the microbes in our soil, the living organisms in our soil, so goes our gut health and human health not long after.
Right. And what nowadays we're in kind of a really precarious place, because we have now out in our environment in agriculture fields and just out inside of the out in the environment in the soils, we now are picking up loads of modified organisms that have been either force modified because of the chemicals or genetically modified in labs and then spread out there, and now they are living in the soil on their own right now. And so the soil is that out of balance that it will sustain that kind of life. And so when you, like our products, we have well over 1,000 strains of naturally occurring aboriginal organisms that have been collected from all over the planet, literally, in our products. And when you then put them on the soil, put them back in the soil, their food source is heavy metals, petrochemicals. They will outcompete the genetically modified ones and kill them, because that's their job. The natural organisms, that's their job by nature for millions of years, or however you view life forever. Their job is to clean the environment, to feed the environment, to protect the environment, and that's what they do. And so when you put them back in, you feed them properly, because most of the soil is severely malnutritioned and out of balance. So then we have food for the microbes, then we have the microbes, and then we have food for the plants and the microbes. So it's this looking at things holistically. It's just similar to looking at it as a whole organism, like a person. You have got to put nutrition there, or fertility, if you will. You've got to get the toxins out. You have to remediate, and you have to create a healthy environment for that plant to sustain the plant. And you have to have organisms that will communicate with the plant. And so that's what we have in our system, is all of those components all at the same time.
And what I draw in conclusion from that is, just over all these years of observing, again, what works to create humans that can, again, do things that other humans could never even remotely dream of: endurance, strength, just the ability to come back day after day after day for just horrendous amounts of abuse and tests of endurance. That when we put the proper high-grade concentrated nutrients into people's bodies, the supplements that I'm talking about, that they will continue to just rebuild over and over and over again in it. And then when you talk about what you're saying with these, literally these microbes created by God, these microorganisms created by whatever created this planet, just simply have way more power than what these lab created organisms have.
Well, sure, because that science, there's been so many studies about that, just that topic alone. That's why this is my theory, is this also goes back into genetic modification, which I did take some classes and bought many books about how they're force modifying things genetically, that whatever that's modified is extremely weak, and it's unnatural, because nature, the whole biosphere, if you look at the whole biosphere as an organism, it does not want these synthetic, unnatural, modified things. So it will kill them. And this is why I learned this with potatoes, because my dad was a potato farmer. They are actually sterilizing the soil year round. They have to toxify the soil year round to raise potatoes, in order to keep all the fungus and blight and bugs away. It's a continuous degradation and war on that soil, which doesn't work, by the way. And those potatoes are so unhealthy that when you put them in storage, I've heard of entire warehouses, these potato cellars, they're called, that hold thousands of semi-loads, thousands and thousands of bags of potato. Bag is 100 pounds, and that they would rot in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks. When they have a really bad blight outbreak and they can't stop that infection, it will just take out, literally liquefy an entire cellar of potatoes. That is modified crap, because nature, this is what the blights and the pests are doing. It's a signal that that's an unhealthy plant. And so nature sends in the recycling crew, the pests, the potato bugs, if you will, and the blights, the funguses, to finish, getting rid of an unhealthy plant. This goes for any crop, because a healthy crop will give off its own natural repellents, where you don't even have to worry about it.
All right. So if you're growing with all the natural inputs that you're talking about that are in your products to rehab soil, reclaim the soil, bring it back to life, create a true healthy living organism out of the soil, the plants are going to give off natural enzymes to inhibit bugs from wanting to eat them and fend off the fungi and all the other stuff that could damage them, correct?
Yeah, it's all different. There's hormones, there's all different kinds of chemistry that's being produced to protect the plant. The plant is, like, if you look at us as a plant, the plant has an immune system just like us, and it will, if it's healthy, it will fend off the intruder or the invader or the problem. It can't. So it's going to call in the recycling crew. It's going to be calling the bugs in, the fungus in, to the bacteria in to break it down. And this is why you can't get healthy if you don't look at that body the same way, because the human body is doing the same thing. This is why people are getting these weird infections. They're getting all this crazy stuff going on because they're unhealthy. So the body's like, okay, I'm unhealthy. I'm dying. Just, recycle me. And so there's these crazy things going on, and it's all the same. It's the same exact theory. People versus and plants and animals. It's the same. In the honeybees, we've figured this out. Same thing going on with honeybees. It's the same problem unilaterally across the biosphere.
So now tell me about when you talk about bees. I want to talk about bees. They talk about mites. They talk about all kinds of issues for honeybees. The pesticides certainly are obviously killing massive amounts of not just bees, but natural remedies to keep mites, to keep their the bees' immune system, all these sorts of things. Is this an area that you've delved into? Because I know I'll have folks that are beekeepers listening to this episode. Is there some advice that you can give them on that?
Yeah, I can give a little story if you will, because
please.
Let's see, I've got a whole four-part protocol for honeybees, and we've been making that for over 10 years. I had my bees on my friend's farm, he was a fruit grower and a vegetable grower, so he had 10 acres of just massive flowers 3 seasons out of the year in Minnesota.
Okay.
So it was pristine, and there was just wild hay all around. There was nothing going on in the neighborhood, so it was like, wow, just pristine. Well, they put up some turkey barns across the road from there, and then I noticed that next year that I was having a little bit of decline, and we had more foul brood, and there was some things going on in the hive that I never had to manage before. And that was when they put conventional Genio turkeys across the road, which are just absolutely chemical poultry. From one end to the other, with just all kinds of stuff in those barns, as well as the antibiotics they feed, and just it's horrible. Well, then that went on for a couple of years, learning how to manage the bacteria and the fungal problems, and then the land all around, somebody died, and they sold all the land to a big farmer, and they planted Roundup Ready corn and beans in the whole neighborhood. So you had this pristine wildflowers and hay and all this and clover. That's all that was around, to then boom, suddenly everything went to corn and beans. And this was, 2006, 7-ish. That next year they didn't put very good honey up that fall. The next year I lost 12 hives.
Wow.
Never lost a hive before in my life.
That's a lot of bees. That's what, about 10,000 bees per hive or more?
There's like 60,000 in a big, because my hives were usually 4 or 5 boxes high.
Okay.
I had 2 full sets of 2 deep supers on the bottom for my brood chambers, and I would usually have 3, 4, 5, honey supers on top, because it was flowers. It was flower heaven. Yeah. I mean, they were coming in, carrying in nectar 3 seasons. And then it was very clear to me, because we went from the flowers, the hay and whatnot, to Roundup Ready corn and beans. And right. I lost my hives. My family lost. That was our honey. And then I sold a little at farmers markets, and I bartered with some. But that was, that it came to an end. And so just like getting your kid vaccinated, and then you all of a sudden have either a dead child or a severely damaged child, it was that clear to me. And so with doing what learning what I've done, and then applying it, the same principles from the human body to the beehive to the soils, it's the same thing going on. These mites this foul brood, this Varroa thing, all these things. The colony collapse disorder is just describing what's going on. Your colony is collapsing, and they name it a disorder. But no one ever finds. Academia is like can't see the forest for the trees because it's really simple. They were bringing home toxins, and they toxify their home, and eventually they have to, as they're dying off, they just leave because the queen's like, oh, man, you guys are dumb bringing all this pesticides in here. Now we can't live here. We got to leave. So they just up and leave. They poison their own home by bringing the pollen and the nectar back in. They've wrecked their own home.
Right. Now, let me ask you, is in terms of the microbial treatments to fend off, mites and things like that, there's conventional, which I've actually used, and the vapors, it's like a taffy that you put on top, you take the roof off and slap it on top. And the vapors from opening that alone scorched my sinuses and my eyes. And I thought this has to be wrong. There's something seriously wrong with this. Maybe you can give a little insight into that.
100% wrong. I mean, the poor bees got to live inside. So basically they're doing chemotherapy on the hive. That's really what those chemical strips and so forth. I've used them. I mean, I tried them, and then I'm like, this ain't working. So the thing that you got to really get is the bees are living in not only in a toxic environment in the hive, but they're working in a toxic environment.
Sure.
So it's just collectively coming back and being concentrated because that's what they're doing is they're collecting the nectar, they're concentrating it into honey.
Right.
And the pesticides, the chemicals, the malnutrition comes with it. It can't help but not come with it. And the idea that those pesticides do not transfer into the nectar or the pollen is absolutely retarded.
Yeah.
Like that's just that's lie. When you can trace the pheromones, you can trace the minerals, you can trace all the electrolysis going on. It's all the same. It's all throughout the plant, just like our body, and those things transfer. It's just like how SV40 transfers from those that took the sugar cube. Now 4 and 5 generations on, we're tracking that. We're tracking the SV40 bioweapon all the way through 5 generations of people right now. So it's the same thing going on in the hive. That junk is being sprayed. The toxins are being sprayed on the plants. That's coming down in the air from whatever these chemtrails and all this stuff. The air is, it comes down onto the plant. That rains down. The plant uptakes all this stuff, and it tries to get rid of it, and it stores it or whatever it does with it, and then the bees collect that.
Now I want to get clarification from you. Now switching from bees, this is super important. So we see, number one, when a plant uptakes heavy metals, for instance, and bonds them with carbon, that's generally how heavy metals become organic forms of metal, correct?
In the plant?
Yes. So when they become, when plants uptake metals out of the soil and bond them with carbon, and then the plants decompose, that's how you get organic forms of metal, correct?
Yeah, I mean that's one way. The plant is uptaking the metals because the plant is trying to use the metal as a food because most of the soil is deficient. So it's going to grab whatever it can to fill a need, just like in our body.
And overall, in terms of overall the thousands of years, for instance, just the accumulation of organic matter is going to have organic forms of metal, carbon bonded, whatever nutrients that we need. We need copper, we need certain metals in our body, but they're more beneficial when they're bonded with carbon, obviously. They're not would that be the difference between a heavy metal and a organic form?
Nope. Not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, that is, yes, naturally, but then you have the petrochemicals, you have all these other things going on as pollutants that would come into that to change that theory a little.
Okay. Yeah, I get what you're saying there. And then, so before we switch over to human beings and what's going on in the world today, what we've witnessed the 3+ years, we've already talked about conventional farming and how detrimental that's been to our soil and plants and animals and humans and the whole chain. But explain for people the difference between organic farming and biological farming, because I've talked to people who mix the organic and conventional together, who are somewhat skeptical in terms of biological farming, and I think there needs to be some clarification for people on that.
In my view, organic just means less toxic. They're still using things that to manage the pests instead of bringing the nutrient quality up. Biological farming is taking the soil, looking at it as an organism, and then treating it as so. So you're wanting a healthy soil so that soil can then have an immune system that works properly. And in order to do that, you're far beyond organic. Organic just really means less toxic. It doesn't mean more nutrient dense.
Because they're still able to have things certified as organic and still have whatever it is, a certain percentage of quote-unquote bad stuff in it, correct?
Yeah, I'll give you a little example. So in 2015, we were down doing some citrus greening trials down in Florida. And my wife and I get out into the field, and I hear this helicopter. I'm like, really low. It's loud. It's just maybe, a quarter mile away. It's like, what in the world are y'all spraying? I thought this was organic, this whole farm. And they're like, oh yeah, that's just the sprayer. They in the state of Florida, it's mandated that they spray all the irrigation ditches and ponds with this specific pesticide to keep this certain invasive weed species down because it is a problem. And I'm like, so let me get this right. You're pulling irrigation water out of that ditch and you're certified organic, but yet they're spraying the pesticide on the irrigation ditch and you're certified organic. Did I just get that right? He goes, well, in essence, yeah, that's exactly what's going on. Yeah. So you really got to know these things if you're really wanting to be informed about things, but that's all hidden. I discovered that because I happened to be standing there and asking questions to the consultant and the farmer about what was going on with this helicopter spraying these poisons.
So when you talk about toxic or organic, like you said, I think that's a very good qualifying message. Or just people think organic it's just less toxic is all you're saying. It's not completely free from toxins. It's just less toxic. So you're still getting
They're not doing any chemical assays on that stuff. They just they have certain rules that you can't use certain things, but you can use certain things. But you don't have to look for nutrient density. You don't have to look for basically what's in the soil for toxicity. I mean, some of these persistent chemicals that they're spraying, they have a half-life of 80 years.
That's crazy. Well,
or longer.
And government and politicians now are trying to widen that gap. I don't know what the number is, but they're trying to make it so you can still have more and more stuff in it and still be certified as organic. So it's really kind of a hustle, the whole or quote unquote organic, as far as what you're buying off the shelves. Because like we've talked about before on the show, it starts with the soil. If the soil is toxic, I mean, it's just going to be, it's next level, man. It's crazy.
And that's why we've had a joint venture with the Native Health Matters. The Indians get this. They call it TEK, traditional ecological knowledge. They've been farming this way forever. The government has even recognized them, and now the group that I'm have a JV with, they recognize what we're doing as their knowledge, restoring the health. And so there's this huge movement that's taking place in the Midwest right now through the Indians, because they see what's going on. They don't want the chemicals. But then again, there's nothing really commercially viable out there in the space that we're in we can do 10,000 acres. So basically what we've done is taken biodynamic agricultural inputs and made it commercially available in a large scale. So we've taken all the dogma religion out of it, and we've just got a fertility program and a process, a system to basically go back to that way of farming pre-Rockefeller, pre-industrialization. The pristineness of it. So that's why we can get an 800% increase in Brix readings on our tomatoes. That's why we can get a 580% increase in yield and have 6 and 7 cobs on a corn stalk. Stuff like that is really unheard of. I don't talk a lot about that to most people because they can't even perceive a 10% increase in yield in a conventional setting, let alone 500 plus.
Well, and that's the thing is I've got a friend out and this is, legit stuff that you're talking about, because I had a conversation with a gentleman who created he refitted his hydroseeder and goes out and does soil reclamation. And, he's got these barley and wheat farmers sitting in the same room with him. And he says, I guarantee my work. He goes, I don't divulge, what it is I'm doing exactly, because most people, number one, can't comprehend it. It's a little tough for them from the agriculture world to comprehend how he's doing things. But more than anything else, some people actually get scared because it's just a little above, their level of even wanting to try and understand things. But these guys were saying, listen, this guy has given us 6 times the yield, and he does it every single year with what he's doing. So this is legit stuff that you're talking about, Dr. Wil, and I've heard several guys talking around the country that specialize in the biological farming, and they're getting it done. They really are, and it's pretty amazing stuff. So now switching gears, to the past 3.5 years, I'm going to make that transition.
Can I ask a couple questions real quick? Because I know it's all going to lend itself to that conversation.
Sure, go ahead,
Dr. Wil. You had mentioned in the beginning, flu is basically getting rid of toxins, and I don't know how comfortable you are opining on this subject, but I had it brought to my attention, and I found it interesting in this world of quote unquote conspiracies, and anyway, the rabbit hole is deep. The Spanish flu, which began, I believe, in 1918, coincided with the end of World War I, which was 1918. So this person said to me, this wasn't some organic thing that happened. This was these soldiers coming home, and their bodies were trying to get rid of the vaccines that were put in them during World War I. And when they came home back to Europe, etc., it spawned the Spanish flu, killing so many people. What are your thoughts on a vaccine tied to Spanish flu as opposed to whatever they said it claimed it was?
Or the chemicals or whatever they brought back.
Oh, absolutely. That was definitely part of it. The other part of that was we had an influx in electrical technology. And so you had the EMF side of that, you had the vaccine side of that, and then you had the same scenario as we witnessed here with the wearing of masks back then. So then you had a you had a manifestation of everybody incubating this stuff ongoingly because they had masks on. So it's an accumulative thing of what you said and what Pat said, and then the addition to the technology increase was going on at the same time, then coupled with the masks.
And the wearing the mask was creating basically a bacterial pneumonia, so to speak.
Sure, it was weakening your immune system, so you were more susceptible to whatever was there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to get your opinion on that. And as we talk about who the they are, and we've brought up numerous times, the Rockefellers. And when I think of Rockefellers, I think eugenics, quite frankly. And when we talk about that inextricable link between agriculture, the medical industry, pharmaceutical companies, you're talking about essentially eugenics, in my humble opinion. Give me your thoughts on if you think that's valid, if they have a eugenicist tie to them, as we're going to get into the conversation we're about to get into with the vaccines, et cetera. What are your thoughts on the eugenic side of what we're seeing? Like I said, the threat is so plainly apparent, and I think it's a very eugenicist agenda. What are your thoughts?
Definitely plays into the model, what we're seeing. It's part of it. I think they're using the broken system in their favor strategically, and I believe that's all part of it. It's all about control. Isn't that what eugenics is?
Well, and determine the I hate to use the wrong terms, but the humans are just unless you're of this ilk, of this bloodline of sorts, you're expendable. Georgia Guidestones. I mean, they still need us around because, like you said, it's all about control. They don't want money anymore. They got all the money they want, but they want control, and they need to have people around to control. They don't want to kill all of us, but there's definitely, I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of expendable lives around here, and we've seen it. Countless bullshit wars.
Yep.
Like I said, the
fodder.
Yes,
the fodder that drives the system.
Right. So enter the COVID-19 issue three plus years ago, and Jeff and I were calling this immediately, saying, we were even talking about it was coming. My miscalculation in the whole thing. I wrote a book, actually. I never printed it because I thought people would think I was crazy, but it was over a decade ago, probably 12, 13 years ago. I wrote a book called Operation Green Tip. And I thought that it was going to be a financial collapse first, and then they were going to force people to get certain injections and all of that sort of stuff to become part of the new system. But what we saw is, using the Trojan horse of COVID-19 to print trillions upon trillions of dollars, and eventually we know what's coming with the financial system, monetary systems, and everything else, or what their goal is anyway. That we're dealing with. I don't know. Would you consider this, in terms of an attack on human beings, a massive alteration in our DNA and the self-assembling nanotechnology and everything else that they've put into human bodies? Is this a system of control where they can control people remotely, so to speak?
That's what the patents say. That's what they're doing. So it's definitely, it's unfolding. That's what's happening.
Right.
The simple answer.
And in the very beginning of this, it was very clear to me, and I said it numerous times, that they're going to speed up a treatment for this. They're going to hurry up. They're going to put it in everybody. That's going to be the real bioweapon. And I said from then moving forward as well that the concentrated organic substances that I knew of, at least, I'm not a doctor, but all of the things that I've researched and used over my life and with different athletes, that they would have the chelation ability to remove these things from the body. And obviously, you're a guy who has been at this for many, many years, correcting human DNA and a lot of other organisms. But your ability to combine products, we do have, substances that have the ability to not only remove these injections from the cells, this technology and all this other stuff from the cells, but to correct people's DNA.
Yes. That's the whole thing with this, the bioweapon that they're injecting into people and that's being shed around now is they meaning the pharmaceutical industry, the bad guys, if you will, they've known that there's natural things that will remedy this for the most part. So they've strategically made it very, very hard for their technology to be released from the cells. So you may be able to get the spike proteins to easily leave, but there's the other aspect of the technology side of this that's bound into the cellular receptors that won't let go very easy. That is the trick in my book. So to get it, you got to get the technology out in order for you to really to have your, if you will, your health sovereignty back.
Well, and if you can, please, because Pat sent me an interview that you did, and it was just, I'm trying to cut the grass, and I'm listening to this, and my mind is just being blown. What is this technology? Because throughout the years, of course, there's so much information, disinformation, whatever, misinformation about 5G and the role and all this other stuff, but you explained it in a way that just made sense to me. What is the technology you're referring to as it relates to what's in the vaccine?
It's the same exact technology that we're talking about that remediates the soil, that reverses genetic modification, that gets the metals, the petrochemicals, the GMOs, if you will, out of the soil or the body. It's the same thing. Because I wrote I don't remember where that was published anymore, about natural chelation. So your body, everything has a yin and a yang, if you will, and in and out and up and a down, right? And we've got this bipolar thing going on, and so chelation. Our bodies are natural chelators. We just clean naturally when we can, if we have the right tools. So we're bringing food, or we're taking food in. Chelation is the garbage out. And so what people don't understand is they can't chelate very well because they can't digest very well, because the things don't work right. And so if you can't take stuff in, you can't take stuff out. So in that regard, it's when you understand that, and then you understand the cellular receptor part of things, which gets into some pretty heavy science, if you will. But the body does not want this junk, if you will, this petrochemicals, these foreign things, these metals. But because people in general are in such a malnutrition state, the body, in its wanting to live and survive, will actually draw in the chemicals and the nanoparticulates and these other things, these vaccine residue that they inject into people, the bioweapons, and actually hold on to them because you don't have the proper nutrition coming in. So when you put the proper nutrition in, if you will, the elements in, and you put the other bioremediation practices in play to get the metals and get these things to help encourage and clean the cellular receptors, the body will freely just give the crap up and take on the good stuff if the system is functioning properly.
Right. And like Pat was saying in the beginning, everyone's inflammation develops and turns into something different for all of us. But things like the movie, and I don't know if you've seen it, the documentary Died Suddenly. Apparently this proliferation of blood clots, which equates to stroke. Me personally, I've known it just there's almost 8 billion people on the planet. Within the last 2 years, that stroke shit has touched me more than once, and it's just completely abnormal. But when I see things like Died Suddenly, I'm like, all right, so this isn't just happening in a vacuum. This is the proliferation of this bioweapon, and if I'm understanding it correctly, those kind of clots is the body trying to get this shit out.
Oh, well, kinda. I mean, the blood clots come from a few different avenues, but yes, in general, but
okay, help me out.
That goes into a really long, deep. I'm not prepared for a conversation, but so the bioweapon, there's a couple things going on. You've got the toxic effect, the acids, the metals, and so forth, that plus the graphene and the shards and that stuff. Those things can lead to blood clots. But you have the technology side of it actually causing the blood clots to then use the blood clots to create the hardware to then link this other hardware system of communication into the body. So if you make it through the initial onslaught, or the first few phases of the injections, if you will, the downloading or inloading of, or uploading, however you want to look at the installing of the components to then the components to be built. I mean, they're linking, they're destroying humanity, turning them into these cyborg slave units, the ones that make it through this.
And is this where, I mean, this is what blew my mind. I'd heard this before, but again, you articulated it in such a way. I'm like, oh my God, there's this hardware is being downloaded and people are being able to track certain IP addresses, or certain, I don't know if that's the correct term, IP addresses on these individuals even after they've died in the grave.
Like they're called MAC addresses.
MAC addresses, yes.
So they're creating they're giving off a Wi-Fi signal of some kind that says, "Hey, I'm ready to receive or to broadcast," and on into the grave for people that have died over a year. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening.
Now, fact checkers have proved that completely wrong.
Yes, exactly right. Those
sadly
awesomely correct fact checkers.
So it's complete lunacy. Now, so real quick, I wanted to talk about lipids and liposomal delivery systems, because I learned about those many years ago through a scientist I was put in touch with who wanted to lengthen the telomeres on the end of my DNA. They wanted to do experiments on me. And he had asked me what supplements I was using, and I explained one, using a liposomal delivery system they were bioengineered to go to the receptors of my pituitary with an amino acid blend, bypassing the digestive system to raise natural growth hormone production. And the product actually worked. It really did. My mother's hair went from white to black and white. She started literally, you could see it. People that I knew, their eyeglass prescriptions were going in reverse. My body, which was beat up at the time many, many years ago, started to improve pretty dramatically. And so while on the phone with him, he informed me that he had received a Nobel Prize for creating liposomal delivery systems and lipids, and then explained how they could be bioengineered to go to specific organs and all of that. Fast forward 2021, they're talking about lipids. They didn't talk about liposomal delivery systems, but I knew what was going on to a certain extent, and saying to myself, okay, what is lying dormant, number one, in these lipids that are still inside of people? We know that some have obviously opened. We've seen a lot of health issues. We've seen a lot of deaths. But there are, from my understanding, there are lipids that are lying dormant waiting to open. And they're talking about some pretty horrendous stuff that's lying dormant within those lipids.
You're talking about how the body holds on to the toxins you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about the lipids that
the food on the food side.
On the liposomal delivery system that act like red blood cells. They're spheres that can hold and deliver. For instance, the scientist that explained his invention of lipids and liposomal delivery systems was, say for instance, someone had liver cancer, and they could not undergo entire body chemo or they would die. They were just too weak. So they would create a sublingual spray that could go into the bloodstream, and those lipids would carry the chemo throughout the system and only deliver it to the receptors of the liver and treat only the liver basically with the chemo. And so these lipids have been programmed, bioengineered to go to, obviously we're seeing heart issues, we're seeing brain cancers explode, we're seeing reproductive issues, all these different issues. So these lipids have been bioengineered, obviously, to go to these parts of the body, but there are other lipids that are holding substances, from what I'm told, that are still lying dormant that have not opened. And that's what I'm concerned about, of what lies ahead for these people and us, frankly.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of good intel on that, as in I don't have any good news. If you're not doing anything aggressively like what we're doing to feed that body, to get that junk out, it's going to persist and it's going to cause problems because it's designed that way.
Right.
The body's holding on to the toxins because the body doesn't have the ability to let it go. Whether they were put there strategically or unknowingly through food or air or water, the body's holding on to this stuff, and that's how it holds on to it, is in that form, in the fat form, in the cellular structure of our body, because it can't. Either the detox pathways are blocked, or the body's just not going to can't let it go for some reason. So that's a simple part of, you replenish the nutritional content of the body, for one, and then we use natural remediation practices like we would out in the environment or in a beehive or whatever inside the body. It's the same thing in essence, and the body wants to be well, just like the plant wants to be well. It can't be well because it doesn't have the ability to be well, and things aren't working right.
Yeah, and so having a conversation at the beginning of all of this, when they came out with the treatments, a friend of mine who's in the pharmaceutical side of the hog industry in the Midwest here, and I said, listen, it's 100% I'm correct in saying that, hogs, when vaccinated, are going to shed, on other hogs, correct? And pass this around. And he said 100%. So when we talk about these treatments and the folks that have been injected with this technology, they're not just shedding the spike proteins. They're shedding potentially the nanotechnology, these self-assembling nanotech, tiny, just,
100%.
I mean, that's being shed as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the people that did not get the injections are having the nanotech installed in them as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's designed that way because the pharmaceutical company, because I have no people inside the pharmaceutical industry, they know the bulk of humanity is not going to take the bioweapon willingly, and so they've created that to be easily remedied by, we'll inject the stupid people, and then they will then shed through another generation of toxicity out to those that did not or will not be vaccinated. So that's the plan. I mean, that is the plan.
Is this one of those, I forget the term, quiet weapons for silent wars type thing? Because it's one of those things. It's hard to create the correlation of causation. Like, people got injected, 3 years ago and are still going to get injected. But what we're seeing as far as the downsides of shedding is that one of those like soft weapons where it's like takes place over years. It's not something that manifests right away. That's why we're not necessarily, we're seeing it to some degree, but we're not seeing it in a mass way as far as people being ill affected by the shedding.
That's what's happening. Kind of broke up there, so I maybe missed a couple parts of what you were trying to convey.
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
I was just wondering, is it something that with the shedding that's taking place, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It takes place over a lengthy period of time.
Sure, absolutely. Really sick people get affected by it really easily. Really, people that are really their immune systems are already having problems. I mean, we get calls often from people like, hey, I am not vaccinated and I don't really go around them, but I went to this event and I was there for 3 hours and then came home and I have been sick for the last 3 weeks, and it all stemmed from that event where I was at when there was vaccinated people at.
Is that why in the initial stages of this we heard so much about women's menstrual cycles, and was that a part of the shedding?
Oh my God, that is the absolute horrible stories that we've been hearing about that. I mean, exactly. Women are a little more sensitive because these are endocrine system disruptors, and females, women's, those that are born that way, not just identify that way, they are more hormonally sensitive, and so that was supposed to be funny. You guys were supposed to laugh. We've heard horror stories. People, I've got gals right now, literally, that called yesterday that they're menstruating. Their monthly cycle that used to be 6 days is now 3 weeks. Absolute hemorrhaging vaginally for 3 weeks. Just crazy stories, throwing clots. We've had numerous girls that were 7, 8 months along pregnancy. They've lost stillborn. They lost their baby just because they are going to work and the vaccinated people at work. Okay, we've had a mother, actually two mothers, gave birth and then went back to work. And within a month, these were girls that were breastfeeding their children. Their children died a month after going to work and breastfeeding their baby, and the baby dies.
Jesus.
That's
the reality I get to hear when people call.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I've got a family member who's good friends with a female homeopathic doctor. She's homeopathic now. She used to be on the board with the FDA of all things and recognized, the horror stories that were going on with that. Jumped ship from that and became a homeopath. And I think it was 16 of the 17 girls in a Facebook group that she was treating, ladies, all had miscarriages. 16 of the 17 had miscarriages because they dealt with the injections and things like that from work. And literally almost every one of them lost their babies.
Yeah.
But a
And
question.
so that is a exhibit of a demonstration of sheer survival for an organism. There's no way that body will let that baby go unless it's in pure survival. Like it can't, like something happened to the baby, or my environment is being extremely toxic, poisoned, and like the tiger is coming after you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's the only way that will ever happen.
But even if
that is an indicator.
even if the baby does make it through the full gestation process, they still, is it been passed on if the mom or dad prior to consent? I mean, I don't know. Is it passed on?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay,
because the fetus is a detox pathway.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the first two babies that are born, usually if they're going to have more babies, the first two are the ones that get most of mom's junk that she's going to clean her body out and give to those two babies. That's just, we see that. I mean, that's so obvious from our experience over the last 20 years that's just the way it is. It's just a pattern, unmistakable pattern.
What about?
So
I hear.
I'll give you a personal example on that before, if you don't mind the time.
No, go for it, brother. Go for it.
Okay, so my wife took the sugar cube in the 60s with the polio, and it was tainted with the SV40. That's a simian monkey virus, as well as the the HPV, human papillomavirus. Her first child was born with papillomavirus in her throat and had 52 surgeries to remove that papilloma before she was 3 years old.
Oh my God.
Okay, now I have tracked HPV and SV40 through every one of her 6 kids, and all 15 grandkids have it.
Wow.
So not only is it passing through the fetus, but the boys are passing it on through the sperm.
They've been altering our DNA for how many decades now?
I would say it's a long time. I'm talking in the 1800s, easy.
It's incredible because, and we still see, and these are the people that I talk about, Doc. You know, I've been lucky enough to be around, world-class wrestlers who are incredibly powerful, power lifters who walk around with 1,000 pounds on their shoulders, guys in their 50s who can run 100 miles, and their face 100 miles without. We're talking in one day through the Colorado Rockies in high altitude, and their facial expressions don't even change. These are superhumans. They're literally X-Men.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I truly believe that these are the people, the unique people whose DNA has not been altered as much as others, and that they're literally perfect examples of living, breathing X-Men walking amongst us. And I really, truly believe that the destiny of mankind is everybody should be at that level. That's the way humans all should be, correct?
We could be, yeah. The issue then, if you're looking at the genetic side of that, is if you've taken a pharmaceutical drug that's patented, then this has been before the 90s, because my neighbor on my farm in Minnesota was a nurse, and she really let me know, because she used to have to do all this weird reporting because in her nursing job, and she was telling me that the corporations, when corporations were just really taking swing into the medical system, that the doctor or the corporation that the doctors work for, actually they track. This is why diagnosing is so important, and the amount of drugs, because if the hospital or the corporation can prove that they've changed your genetic structure, then they can patent that whole thing and turn it into a securities and make more money for the corporation, just like they do with mortgages. And so really this is what's happening, layered on top, especially with this latest round of so-called vaccines. They've basically taken your identity away from you that way genetically, because anyone that's taken that shot, you're altered majorly. And again, that goes into the corporate straw man, your medical straw man, and how they're controlling it's all about the dollar and this fictitious monetary system we live in. So my concern is genetic integrity. That's been my focus for a long time, and because we can monitor gene expression, we can know what's there with our lab, and so that's why I can say comfortably that we're reversing genetic modification, because we see it, and to bring back that genetic integrity. My concern is a lot of this technology with pharmaceuticals in whatever capacity, they mess with the genes enough. And so my concern is always, if you've got this superhuman strength and this, like you say, this X-Men type of thing, then you're wanting to really keep the genetic purity there, because you want to keep that integrity that you have and pass that on, right?
Sure.
That's where I've been and we monitor that, and we're all about that as well, just like you are. So it's to keep that passing on, and that's what the system or the man does not want that, because then you don't need the system, because
Right. And it's the thing is, they don't want us at a high conscious level, a high intelligence level, i.e. fluoride in the water, byproduct chemicals from aluminum production. It's insanity, but they certainly don't want us powerful physically either.
Right.
Able to defend ourselves, and it was just
exactly
at one point in my prime, I was walking through a mall, and I realized that I literally felt like that 100 people in that mall could attack me all at once, and they couldn't do anything to me. And they literally couldn't. That's how weak humans have become. When I look around now, fast forward, 20 some years from the time when I was a world champion, human health. I mean, I look around me. Yesterday, we were at a grocery store, and literally 90%, at least 90% of the people that were in that store and outside in the parking lot have become deformed. They're either super obese, their structure is destroyed, their mental health is destroyed, their awareness, their consciousness. That humans have literally become just walking drones, just destroyed wrecks of civilization. And it's incredible to witness. And it's very sad. It's actually heartbreaking for me to witness.
All by design.
Meat golems, dude. Meat golems. Just mindless air sucking meat golems, dude. I want to ask you before we let you slide. I mean, I'm here as long as you want to be here, Patrick. Hopefully you got time too. Have you heard about the different? Are there different batches of the vax that are floating around? Some people say you got the placebo, you got the Moderna, and they say that's owned by DARPA, Johnson and Johnson. Like the different variations of this vaccine. Are there different batches floating around, and we're all just some big control group, so they can just see how it's affecting each person differently, each batch?
Yeah, that's what I've been told.
Mm-hmm. Next level, dude.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, when I did research and I dug into, the USTPO.gov site on trademarks and patents, and I dug into the patents on the vaccines going all the way back to smallpox and all the other stuff that was going on back in those days, that you could see the ingredients in the vaccine that hinted that the next pandemic was in those vaccines. Am I on the right track here?
Yeah, because they're already whipping that up right now. There's already 3 cases of dengue fever and some Marburg showing up in hospitals, because some of the nurses I work with are witnessing it. So they're already whipping it up. It's between now and July. Now the next 3-4 weeks is when the next round, according to Todd Calendar, is going to be really the next pandemic is coming. They're building it right now.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I've said, that the Marburg. This is what I was alluding to earlier with what was lying dormant in the lipids in people's bodies from the injections was the Marburg virus, the 1p36 gene deletion, the brewer's yeast, and some of the other stuff that's in there potentially.
It's more insidious than that, because they have the hydrogel and the other components, the mRNA. So if you take the hydrogel and the mRNA, and then you take a certain frequency, you can just bombard the body with Marburg frequency, and it'll develop. You can do it with a lot of different organisms, and because in the 1990s they took a hermetically sealed solid glass, a hollow glass vial with nothing but just pure silica in it. The air was sterile, everything. The silica was sterile. They beamed E. coli frequency into it with a laser, and it started to grow.
Wow.
See,
that was 30 years ago.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's another part of everything we've heard about the convolution of this kind of conversation, the 5G aspect of it. But some of you just brought up Dr. Buttar, the very late Dr. Buttar, if I'm pronouncing his name right. He passed away very suddenly and was a huge advocate of not messing with this vaccine, etc. He talked about basically that a certain frequency in ELF, a 5G, some type of frequency releasing, almost kind of going back to what Pat is talking about, releasing this hardware that you've alluded to, something about the 5G that could release it. What are your thoughts on 5G's role in this? Or, I mean, you kind of it's alluded to, there's a certain frequency that can release this stuff. Is that a 5G a part of this in any way?
That's the one part of the system. I mean, they can do it on your phone now. They can do it on anything that can give off a frequency. Your televisions, your refrigerators, your car, the phone. They beam it through the air, so they just bombard that. It's epigenetics is all it is. You're sending. This is like a reverse rife, if you will, or a reverse homeopathy. They're sending frequencies out to create the cancers and to create the infections and whatnot. You're just bombarding the air with them. And so it's really that simple. It's just, like I said, it's like a reverse rife technology, if you will.
Well, I'm glad you brought up epigenetics, because, I was going to ask you about Dr. Bruce Lipton, his book, the biology belief. It's not just your environment, but how your thoughts of the environment. So you definitely believe there is an epigenetical kind of stuff going on with everything that's happening.
Totally is. I mean, what's epigenetics? It's just stuff coming in, information. They're broadcasting information all the time, because I forget the day. I think Obama took and reversed some law like they had placed back in the 40s, I believe, where about subliminal messaging. There was a law in place for the longest time, and I think it was Obama that repealed that. So now they can bombard us with frequencies freely now, because basically, if you're a U.S. citizen, they own you.
Well, and that's a part of
can do that.
The National Defense Authorization Act, where they make propaganda legal, et cetera, kind of what you were alluding to.
Same thing, yeah.
But yeah, what you're talking about, Dr. Bruce Lipton, epigenetics, it's epi meaning above genetics. And what he'd kind of ascertained through his study as a microbiologist is the genes are just kind of the blueprints of an architect on the table. It takes a contractor or somebody from outside to stimulate it to come in to make those genetics active. And that's kind of what it sounds like what's happening with this mRNA technology, this hardware you're talking about, that could be easily influenced by ELF, 5G, HARP, or whatever people call it, external frequencies.
It's easily, because that's the way nature is. It's designed that way. Our genes just are a response mechanism to the environment. So if you live in a emotionally sewage environment, you're malnutrition, and you have infections, you're going to have, let's just say, the MTHR gene expressed. So you change the environment, you clean it up, you start working on getting your HPU condition to go away, your brain to calm down, and you're cleaning up your food and in your intake. The MTHR gene just goes away. I've watched it.
Yeah.
I've watched it. People coming to us, especially I had a 9-year-old girl with 100% expression of the MTHR gene. She was exhibiting just about all the symptoms. Over 9 months, we changed her diet. We got her on supplements. We were doing emotional work. We watched it go from 100% expressed to 87% expressed to 46 to all the way to 0. You change the environment, the gene will express, because the gene is a response mechanism.
Interesting.
It's response to the environment. You change the environment, the gene will change.
Scientifically proven, ladies and gentlemen.
Exactly. You get rid of the tapeworm, and the gene exchanges in your body.
What is, and we can only speculate, and I don't know where your head goes with this. Pat and I have been doing this for 10 years, and we've been speculating. What is the end game, Dr. Spencer? What are they doing? What is this? What is going to look like? Elon Musk with the Neuralink, the Internet of Things,
Well, if I have any say of it, it's not going to look like they want.
Well, what is their end? Yeah, we know what our end game is. What is their end game? Is this? Are we going for Judge Dredd, Minority Report? Every Future Shock, any kind of scientific dystopian world? Is that where they're going to? Is that the end game, if you will?
Well, I just listened into the World Economic Forum and their stuff. I mean, it coincides with, what I was told in the 80s. It's been the same program that I was introduced to in 78 and in the 80s, it's the same program, just the actors have evolved generationally, but it's the same outgame. It's all about control.
Yes.
It's about we got too many people on the planet. It's the Georgia Guidestone things. It's just the same, whatever. It's the same thing. They got different names and views of it.
And it goes back to the eugenics model I was talking about a little earlier.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and before we let you slide, I thought this was very fascinating, and I didn't realize, and I'd heard about this, the demand for unvaxxed blood. Now, does that mean unvaxxed COVID vax? Because a lot of people are still vaxxed, and a lot of this hardware still could be in, as we know, the schedule of vaccines is now up to 70, 60. So your Center for Unvaxxed Blood, what is the criteria for being unvaxxed blood? And talk to us about that demand that's growing for.
The demand is huge. You've heard of Radius Health Exchange?
Yes.
I'm one of the founders of that. And that is our goal. We're actually having a meeting tonight later on about making sure of the purity, because you can pick the stuff up by shedding. It's that's how pure do you want it? I mean, my wife had a surgery in January, and the university where we did the surgery took place. They don't classify unvaccinated blood from vaccinated. They don't make a difference. They don't designate a difference. So we've actually had a friend who went on our products for several months because we were prepping for this. And so we got extremely good blood, because she was on our products and everything for a good month before she gave blood for my wife, because we got blood after we got out of the hospital because the hospital wouldn't allow it.
Good old hospitals. They build. That's something that I've always and recently really been keying in on. Why are hospitals the biggest buildings in every town and city? Literally, it's madness. It's absolute madness.
Because there's so many sick people. We're all sick.
Because there is, it's a great business model, though, if you think about it.
It's fantastic.
Technically, the number one GDP in our country at $4 trillion a year.
You're right.
Healthcare, lovely. So let's get down to business here, because I want people to be able to find you. Your radiushealthexchange.com. Is that correct? That's the .com for the blood exchange.
Yeah, that's the blood exchange, as well as there's practitioners on there as well. It's a alternate looking for practitioners that are not totally engrossed in the AMA. That's one of them. Patientadvocatebulldog.com. That's where we're helping people get out of hospitals, and there's a whole product line there of different things for at home care.
Yeah,
right?
And I've recently been contacted by the family of, I can just say that he's a well-known name in the world soccer scene, and he's having all kinds of health problems. And so I've steered him toward the Patient Advocate Bulldog site, number one, to get your products there to change that situation. But and then so the Patient Advocate Bulldog is where people can go if they've suffering from health issues, want to clean their body out, clean their cells out, all of that good stuff. And then we go to the amazing products at environautics.com, if you want to spell that out real quick.
Environautics. Yep. ENVIRONOTICS.com. We've also our other partnership, which is in the Indian country, is AmericanIndianMicrobes.com.
Okay. All of these links will be in the description of the video, ladies and gentlemen, so don't fret.
Fantastic.
Right. And so, Doc Wil, we want to thank you very much for joining us today. This is, I think, Jeffrey and I have talked to some folks that were heavy hitters from G. Edward Griffin to Peter Schiff, in the economics world and a lot of other areas, special forces folks, military intelligence. We've talked to a lot of people over the past decade, and I want to tell you that this is truly one of the more impactful, if not the most impactful, interviews that we've done, and I'm sure Jeffrey feels the same way.
No, without a doubt. I mean, this is some of the craziest times. I hate to quantify. We all live through crazy times, but this is the crazy stuff we're dealing with, and the threat is so next level. And I thank you for bringing light to how deep the rabbit hole goes, because I know it's very scary for people to even kind of entertain how bad and how crazy this is. But
Well,
it is. That's part of the Stockholm syndrome.
Well, exactly, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Really?
Earlier. Yes, it is. It is. So thank you so much, man. Thank you.
yeah.
You're welcome.
So,
Thank you guys for having me on. I deeply appreciate it, and I'm humbled. Thank you.
Appreciate it. And so this is Pat Miletich signing off for my broadcast partner, Jeffrey Wilson. And thank you again, Dr. Wil Spencer, for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, guys.